Praveenpuram with all the informational live shows with great people in the community. Today, we have esteemed guests from the Startup Incubator. Our topic would be disrupting global startup incubators. We have Ali Merritt from Atlanta Tech Village and Mr. Srinivas Rao, called as MSR. He is the CEO of T-Hub. So most of you might have known that is the heart in the Hyderabad. And coming to the show, this show is all about bringing awareness on great topics, which are very, very friendly to the NRIs. Any information, knowledge, achievement can be shared on this show. So just let's get started. I will formally welcome Ali Merritt and MSR to the show. Welcome.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So let me introduce Ali Merritt and MSR in a short bio, and then I will let them to introduce if I have missed any. So Ali Merritt is the managing director of Atlanta Tech Village and formerly head of community at SalesLoft, where she had been everything from product management to CX to chief of staff. Ali has spent last decade focused on diversity and inclusion in the Atlanta startup community. She has previously organized Atlanta Startup Village and sporadically blogs about tech and startups at Ali in the ATL.com. That's a fantastic profile, Ali, and great to know about you and your work in the startup era. And similarly, I would like to introduce MSR. So MSR is the CEO of T-Hub. As you all know, T-Hub is in Hyderabad, Telangana, and MSR is the CEO, which enables and empowers an ecosystem hungry for innovation. An accomplished serial entrepreneur, MSR has built and scaled businesses across geographies over his 33-year stint in the IT industry. He's a native of Telangana, and he holds an MBA from the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore, and a bachelor degree in engineering college in OU College of Engineering. With that said, we will discuss more about their achievements and how the startups have been growing. So I will let Ali to introduce more if I have missed any about you, what you want to say to the viewers of Mana TV and TV5.
I don't know that you missed anything. I think that it's always interesting when you have to condense your career into a couple of sentences, and what you want people to know about you. The only other thing that I might mention is Atlanta Tech Village is the fourth largest innovation hub in the US, specifically focused on tech. And so I think in a lot of ways, T-Hub and Atlanta Tech Village have a lot in common with our goals and what we're trying to do for entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Ali. MSR, please let the viewers know more about T-Hub and what are your achievements.
Sure. So I think T-Hub is about 6.5 years old. So obviously, I think for many of the viewers, they will know that Telangana as a state was formed in 2014. It became the 29th state of the union, and the leadership wanted to do something to place entrepreneurship and innovation, at the forefront of everything we do. And so, to put that into motion, T-Hub was set up. T-Hub is a public-private partnership with the government of Telangana, the International Institute of Information Technology, the Indian School of Business, and NALSAR, three academic institutions and the government coming together to set up this entity. And in the last 6.5 years, we started off originally as a co-working space, but obviously we moved on to incubation, acceleration. We also do a lot of work in the corporate innovation space, helping corporates with their open innovation, helping them with integrating with the open innovation ecosystem. Happy to say that in the last 6.5 years, we've had about 1,100 plus companies we've worked with and help them. So I guess the first thing is help them survive, right? One, and second is go on to build. Many of them have gone on to build scaled businesses, have raised close to $4 billion of capital, and have created a large number of jobs in Hyderabad. So yeah, that's a quick
Excellent.
snapshot of what we do.
Great, MSR. Great to know about the achievements. And just wanted to again set the stage. This is exclusively how to connect, how to bridge between international hubs, right? So, for example, T Hub is in Andhra Pradesh, in Telangana, and also it is in India. And this is the Atlanta Tech Village is in Atlanta. So our aim is basically how to bridge the gap and what type of synergies can be done between the hubs together, right? And second thing, most of the buzzwords, if you hear, entrepreneurship, startups, incubators, right? So how do anyone, if you see today's youth, even I see most of the youth are also inventing, innovating, and coming up with ideas. So how does the youth can come to these incubators? What is the medium they can reach out to us, and how you guys can help them? So that's the first question we will start, because that is a basic question. If anyone have an idea what they have to do and how they have to connect. So please, anyone can go ahead, how, what, and how, why they have to come to you.
Yeah. If you're okay, I'll start. So we do have our initial focus for Atlanta Tech Village is primarily Atlanta. And then by extension, the Southeast, we are trying to create opportunity in the South, specifically because it is frequently an underrepresented area of the country, and try to reach out to people who aren't in Silicon Valley and can't afford to live in San Francisco, for example. So we do a lot actually with our local communities, both with the universities and their entrepreneur hubs in the local area, as well as hosting high school students, middle school students. We actually hosted a high school pitch competition the other day. And we send our founders and our investors who are affiliated with the village, as well as our mentors and advisors, into the community to try and make sure that we are providing resources and creating that connectivity. Because so much, especially in the United States, around being able to fundraise for your startup and know where to go and find those resources is around who you know. And a lot of youths don't start with that level of connection. So we're trying to help build that connectivity to begin with. Anybody can reach out and have a tour here. We also host a lot of events, which are currently still, there's a piece of them that are virtual, so they are accessible internationally as well. Although depending on time zone, maybe not as accessible in India, since we have quite a bit of a gap, unfortunately.
Absolutely, absolutely, Ali. MSR, you want to add anything around this?
Sure. So I think so to the two or three different ways, we try and build any young person with an idea can potentially engage with us. So currently, similar to what I think Ali said, we do have a large college outreach program. We actually run a program, we call it Instilling the Entrepreneurial Mindset, we call it EMC. So we're currently working with about 35 colleges across Telangana. So essentially the intent there is to basically sensitize young people about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship as a viable career choice. Not everyone needs to go out looking for a job, but potentially, we can figure out how to build and obviously educate them about the pros and cons of entrepreneurship and all of that. That's one part. And then, so what we do is at the end of these engagements, we typically identify typically in each college, we identify about 50 young people who seem to exhibit an entrepreneurial mindset. Right, and then we run a kind of hackathon where they can come up with ideas, flesh it out, pitch in front of a jury, and so on. And so essentially, it gives them, and usually there are some small grants available, so that in case some of these ideas are potentially convertible to a business, they get the opportunity to do that. So that's one part of it. Now, for people outside of the college system. So suppose there's somebody who's already, for example, working somewhere and has got an idea about which, most entrepreneurs start with a vision that they want to change the world, right? So you know, so basically, so we have programs. So essentially, the programs, the first program I talked about is a program called, we call it Launchpad, which we work with colleges. And then the kind of this, we think about entrepreneurship as a kind of feeder, right? So you have different blocks at different points in time. So if you've got an interesting idea, then we run a program, we call it Masterclass. The whole intent is to kind of help you suss out the idea, make sure that, many times, many entrepreneurs you'll find take too long to understand whether whatever they're building is something which is sometimes maybe just a Me Too idea. The problem has been solved elsewhere, or it's something which is going to be really hard to scale, right? Or also some cases it's really hard to make money, right? As an example, right? And then after struggling for a couple of years, they sometimes run out of money, or run out of patience, and then decide to give it up all. So the intent of that program is to basically figure out how we can reduce the time for the young person with the idea to figure out whether it's something which they really seriously want to pursue, building a business around it, right? It's again across both for profit as well as not for profit, right? So you could be a social impact entrepreneur, for example, right? You want to solve for problem around waste management or water management, or or clean energy or whatever. But end of the day, you have to figure out how to convert the idea into something where you can actually build a sustainability around the entity, right? So that's what we really do. So and people can come in through the website. We also, of course, do outreach programs, which I imagine would not be dissimilar to what Ali is doing. Yeah. So we all kind of sing of the same hymn sheet, if you will. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think you want to add something?
I would like to add something. I think, MSR, you touched on something I think that's important, is that many people have an idea that they want to change the world, but they don't necessarily understand how to make it financially feasible as a business. And that can be one of the hardest things, I think, for people to make that next step. And certainly there are ways to do that with a nonprofit, but it's much more advantageous if you can create a business model that works and self-sustains as well. We do a program called Startup Summer School every summer. So it's every Thursday for 8 weeks. And you start with Entrepreneurship 101, and then you slowly dig into things that are in more specific ways. So building your business case, for example. And we've actually got several teams of parent and teenager who are attending, which is wonderful, that the parents are supporting the teen who wants to learn how to do this. And some of them are actually creating companies together, which is even more wonderful to see these family companies happening. But to your point, providing the vision of here's a great idea, here's how you make it into a business. And that can be, I think, the hardest step for people.
Awesome. Awesome, Ali and MSR. So very, very interesting point you have touched. If anyone has an idea, you can go on to T-Hub, or you can go on to Atlanta Tech Village and see if you can be part of the Launchpad or the Atlanta Summer Classes. So what do you think today's world, the young, even from a 7th grader as well, you see the entrepreneurs, right? So do you see our schooling system or the universities are equipped to, have a curriculum on entrepreneurship? Do you think are we ready?
So do you want me to go first?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay, let's put it this way, right? So if you think about some of the skills which you require to be an entrepreneur, right? I think, we can talk about many of them, but broadly, I think, you can define it as, things around critical thinking, around collaboration, right? Around problem solving, right? Communication, and, being able to put a team together, and all of that stuff, right? So I think, to be fair, I think there's a lot to be done, on that front, right? It's fair to say that I think our colleges and schools particularly do not really equip children with these, what you might call 21st century skills, right? Because today, I think it's fair to say that technology changes rapidly. So you can learn a programming language, but you probably need to learn a new one in the next 5 years,
Maybe
right?
less.
Yeah, yeah. So
Absolutely.
I think what's really important is, to focus on things which, since so everything is so fast paced and everything's changing so rapidly, focus on some of these things, as I said, critical thinking, collaboration, community, and communication, and so on. So I'll pause here for Ali, uh, for Ali's reflections.
I agree entirely. I think that in a lot of ways, schools and the school system has a formal process that doesn't necessarily allow for teaching critical thinking. You teach a lot of memorization and regurgitation, which works for a school and a testing environment, but doesn't necessarily translate into, to your point, the critical thinking skills, the communication skills, the interpersonal skills that are really necessary for creating a new startup, becoming an entrepreneur. I will say that I've seen more colleges start creating programs specifically focused on entrepreneurship, startups. I don't think that maybe college is too late for that almost. I feel that maybe those sorts of programs are going to have a much bigger impact if you're starting in high school, you're starting in middle school, when a lot of children are still feeling very creative, they still have ideas, they haven't yet been taught to only think inside a very small box. And some of the schools in Atlanta, for example, that are working on a little bit of a less formal curriculum, do things like create entrepreneurship classes. The high school students that I mentioned that we hosted the pitch event for have a semester long entrepreneurship class, and they're juniors in high school. They are 15, 16 years old, and they are in an entire class where they are required to come up with a startup idea from start to finish and then pitch it at the end. And they actually get several $1,000s at the end to take that idea to the next level. And I think starting at that level or even earlier is critical to creating the next generation of entrepreneurs, because MSR, I completely agree, the critical thinking skills are sort of not as valued when you are just in a testing environment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So another interesting question I wanted to ask, because most of whether it is NRIs or anywhere local guys, see, most of the entrepreneurs, if you see, they will be from the urban community, right? For example, there are certain ideas from the rural community as well, but they do not have the awareness. As MSR has pointed, few of the startups, they know what is the idea, but you need to know how we need to put it in place and move it forward. We can't wait years together, right? The world is changing every month. The new technology is coming, and that will be disrupted. So what is your recommendation or inputs to any of the entrepreneur? For example, your Launchpad program or the Atlanta semester programs. Do you give them mentorship? It's free, or they have to pay, or what is the cycle you follow?
Go ahead.
Ali, go first. Go first.
So we do several things. Startup Summer School, for example, is, I think it's 8 classes once a week. You can sign up for the individual classes. It's $10 a class. Intentionally, we keep it low, and that includes lunch. So we try to make sure that you're getting value for while you're there. And you can actually buy package for a little bit cheaper. So we're intentionally trying to keep it on a slightly cheaper level. If you are already a Village member, it's free to you. But we also offer a lot of free workshops that we do weekly that are free to anybody. And most of those have a virtual component as well. We advertise them, you sign up, you attend, and we have industry experts speaking on everything from personal branding to how to understand a cap table to, just thinking through how to build your business model. And we want to do that so that it is as accessible as possible at a very non-monetary level. We also do a lot of networking events to try and build that communication, that community that MSR mentioned. that are free, that are available. We provide food, we provide beverages because we want to make them accessible. And we cross promote those to the universities in town, as well as to the startup ecosystem as a whole. And I think an extension of that is also, you don't have to be based in Atlanta to go. So there are people who are living in surrounding areas that are a bit more rural, or not just even a city, but maybe a community that's an hour and a half away that may come into Atlanta for those events.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I think our approach here has been, we've taken we have an ecosystem in place, which has been built, partly obviously with government support. So we have two other, you might call them sister entities. So we have something called Telangana State Innovation Cell, TSIC.
Mhm.
And this is the focus of this is largely tends to be on what we call tier 2 and tier 3 cities and towns, and focus on impact entrepreneurship, rural entrepreneurship and things like that, right? So we work closely with the district administrations in those places. So there could be a young person who has an interesting idea, but he doesn't have the advantage which somebody living in a big city has, right? Access to markets, access to mentors, or access to capital, and so on. So that's one part. Then we also have another sister entity. We call it TASK, Telangana Academy of Skilling and Knowledge. So they work closely. They work in about 700 colleges, right? And part of what they do is also this piece around entrepreneurship and so on, right? So we work closely in conjunction with them, right? And then typically, similar to what I think Ali said, we do have lots of these community events where we young, so for example, see, entrepreneurship, a lot of entrepreneurship tends to be about aspirational. It tends to be aspirational, right? So you need to have, people need to feel that people like them, ordinary folks without any particular, advantages of birth or genetics or whatever, right? Can also go out there and become an entrepreneur, right? So they get inspired when they see people similar to their backgrounds, right? Go out there and become successful. So we try and do that a lot and get people to come in, talk to people, do something. Sometimes we call it, we have a lot of what we call these AMAs, ask me anything, right? So people ask you, why did you want to start a business, right? How did you go about it? How did you get your first customer? How did you get your first investor, right? How did you hire your first employee, and so on, right? And then they realize, listen, if this chap who comes from a background very similar to mine, has been able to do it, there's no reason why I can't. So it's the role model, storytelling,
Representation matters. I completely agree. We try very hard to have a variety of representation, to your point, MSR, so that people see people who are like them and you think, I can do that too. We actually have what we call a pre-accelerator. So maybe you have an idea that's just past the back of the napkin stage, but you don't necessarily have much else going with it. And we run 2 cohorts a year of that with 8 to 10 people in each cohort. And it is specifically based on underrepresented founders. So people of color, women, and it is sponsored by Microsoft for startups, Dell for startups, Audi, and you get non-dilutive capital at the end of it to help you take that next step, as well as we give village memberships at a very large discount so that people can continue the community. And while they're in the cohort, they get a free membership with us to start building that connectivity and allow them access to our mentors and advisors and create that network. And it has, I think we're on cohort number 10 over the last 5 years, and it has made a huge impact in changing the demographic makeup of our ecosystem. And they want to give back then. And so they recommend great people for the next cohort, and it sort of becomes this really wonderful synergistic experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think definitely persistence, consistency, and also a passion and storytelling. These are the terms we use for the startups to grow and sustain. So one of the question I wanted to ask both of you, especially on behalf of NRIs, right? So when an NRI carries a visa and come to US, suppose for example, he has an idea. So now touching upon the point on government support, right? There are certain grants which can be availed. How these NRIs can be, so whether they can go for US government or they can go for Indian government. So this is a sensitive topic, definitely, but being an NRI, being here, has an idea, how does he approach for the grants? Where can he approach? That's the question always has in my mind. We are in between. We are neither there or here. So definitely, MSR, I wanted to your thoughts on it. NRIs coming here, having ideas, if they want to fund from India, how this process works, or vice versa.
Sure. Now that's a little bit of a hard one, Praveen. So, but I'll try, right? I'll try. So obviously our obvious focus obviously is largely to support business which get built ground up where we are, right? And that's our intent, essentially to, essentially. So obviously, as we all know, right, entrepreneurs play a huge role in economic value addition, creating jobs, and all of that. And to the extent possible, we'd obviously like those to be happening where we are, right? I'm assuming, I can see, I think Ali is nodding, so I'm assuming she'll probably echo what I'm saying, right?
I agree, yes.
Yeah. So obviously, and of course, there's also, if we become, for example, if Telangana gets better, obviously India will get better, right? So
Absolutely.
from that angle, that's how we think about it. But obviously, we also, in terms of, there are a couple of things we do, from a support standpoint. For example, let's say the NRI, for example, wants to come back to India and set up something in India. We do definitely work closely with the government to help them get a soft landing, etc. Help them with the regulatory framework and all of that stuff. But it's fair to say our focus is really more on getting entrepreneurs in Telangana, right, to first start, right, and then to scale.
Absolutely. Thanks. I think that gives at least thoughts to NRIs, and they are comfortable listening this, that you encourage NRIs coming there and for a soft plan. So obviously, if anyone reach out to us seeing this program, definitely I will divert to you both, and then you can take it from there. So Ali, you got to say something for especially NRIs here. How do you want to invite them, encourage them?
I think much like MSR mentioned, that's a hard question for me to answer for some of the same reasons. One of Atlanta's Tech Village's goals is to create 10,000 jobs in the Atlanta ecosystem in 10 years. We are almost at 10 years, and we are at right around 9,000 jobs created in the local ecosystem. So for us, a lot of it is trying to create, and to MSR's point, to start and then keep people in the local economy to help create more and more in the local economy and grow our area. But that being said, we support entrepreneurship as a whole, anywhere that people are looking to do it. We have a lot of teams who have national or international headquarters, but they have smaller teams who now live here, especially with the new hybrid workforce. And so we do support that. You don't have to be a founder to be the person who's at Atlanta Tech Village or in our ecosystem. You can be a team member, for example. There's also a fair amount from a government perspective. There's a fair amount of government funding with the SBIR, STTR, and several other of the fill in the acronym. The government does love their acronyms. So there's a lot of non-dilutive capital now becoming available. And it's been interesting to talk to people recently and see how people are bridging the gap between the government and how they talk about capital and startups and what they think of, and how the rest of us think about entrepreneurship, and how do you streamline that process to be able to create a connectivity of somebody who has a really great piece of technology that doesn't necessarily understand how to get it into something that might make a governmental impact. And government doesn't have to mean, for example, military. It could be something where a city needs a piece of technology to be able to support the local infrastructure. So there are a lot of opportunities there that I think that people are just now finding out about. And we partner with several teams that have been both on the government and military side and on the startup side, so they understand how to speak the language of both.
Awesome. Thank you, Ali. That insights definitely helps all of the viewers to know more about the government funds. And in the interest of time, I would extend like 10 minutes and ask a few rapid questions to you both. So why don't you give, what is your signature event? Ali and MSR, you can tell what is your the signature event of both of the companies.
Can I pick two?
Yes, please.
I would say that first we have a bi-monthly pitch event. So every 2 months we have Atlanta Startup Village. We have 5 companies. They get 5 minutes to pitch. And then at the end, we have an audience vote, and the crowd favorite from a whole year's worth then compete against each other at a pitch off, and they get free access to the village plus parking for a year. So we do that every other month, and it's been going on for 9 years. So we've had 9 times, 12 months and all of the startups. So we've had a huge impact on that. And then our other large event is called Pitch ATL. Also a pitch competition, but it is a curated list of local startups, not just ones who are members here, but of the Atlanta ecosystem. And we intentionally bring in about 125 investors nationally and internationally, and have the companies pitch to them. It's very high value, it's invitation only, and it's meant to get startups that are in the process of funding that have a really great runway, visibility directly into the investors. So I would say those are probably our 2 flagship, one which allows any entrepreneur to apply and pitch their idea, and one which is a bit more curated.
Awesome. MSR.
Yeah, so on similar lines, so one is we do these we call it pitch days, similar to what I think Ali was talking about, where we curate a set of startups, and that's a curated program, so it's not open to everybody. Curate a set of startups which meet a certain criteria, which could be either on the depth of the problem they're solving, revenue traction, kind of customers, kind of team, bunch of parameters we look at, and then we get them in front of investors. And so that's one part, right? And the other one we do is we do an event called Confluence, which is where we bring startups and corporates together. So essentially, for example, let's say we identify startups in a few domains, which could be, for example, healthcare, it could be in sustainability, it could be in ed tech, it could be in fintech, and so on, right? And then go out and ask corporates, corporate large companies, to help put together problem statements, right? Listen, we're trying to solve this problem, and is there a good startup out there which is already, partially cracked the code, if you will, and then play the role of a kind of honest matchmaker, which is get the startups in front of the corporates. And typically, the outcome we would like at the end of it is if we can get the startups to actually get to a proof of concept, right, with the corporate, right? Or better still, if the corporate says, listen, I'll fund you, right? So that's what we look for. So those are 2 things which we do. Of course, we do a bunch of things. We have sometimes I actually wonder whether we do a lot of events.
Same.
Great to hear from both of you. And this is the question related to synergy, right, between Atlanta Tech Village and THUB. So I'll go with MSR first. MSR, if you were to ask 1, 2 things to Ali for helping THUB, what would they be?
Sure. So I think, I'll just start with a very simple, so I have a very simple 6M and 2P framework, which I'll very quickly tell you about. Okay. So, for a business to be successful, it needs 6Ms. Okay. And the 6Ms are access to markets, access to money, access to mentors, access to manpower or talent, motivation and mindset, right? And the 2Ps are partnerships and policy support, right? So we do know, particularly for companies in India, the US is the holy grail, right? Particularly if you are in a B2B business, it's hard for you to build scale unless you figure out a way to crack the US, right? So we'll be happy to do, happy to work with Ali and figure out if there are exchange programs, right? So for example, if there's a startup from India which wants to figure out how to get into the US market and use Atlanta as a route, right? Atlanta, as she said, is the fourth largest hub. It is representative. It's large enough, right? And they need to understand, the nuances of operating, a global business. So that's clearly one option we could look at, and it works the other way too. We have startups. We're currently working with startups from Australia, Korea, and Japan, which are now looking to access the India market. So happy to work with Ali on facilitating a two-way exchange.
I love that. Yes, I am in. Let me know how we can send people back and forth and make connections on both sides. Happy to do it. Even if Atlanta Tech Village itself isn't the right fit, we are connected to the other ecosystem hubs. We have several that have even more specialized focuses. And we will be happy to make introductions and connections wherever we need to.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ali.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, MSR. And similarly, Ali, if you were to, ask MSR a couple of help from the T-Hub, what would they be?
I think it's actually interesting that MSR, you mentioned that B2B is hard in India. I think the opposite is true in the US, is we do a lot of, especially in Atlanta, we do a lot of B2B. We don't do as much B2C. And so there are a lot of companies that are looking for beta testers. How do we get product market fit and validation? And so I think that it would be really interesting to talk through what would it look like to be able to have some of our companies who are at that stage, who need more access to B2C customers, to see about doing maybe some sort of beta testing exchange with people on your side. That would be lovely.
Sure.
Absolutely.
That's a conversation we should have, Ali.
I would love that. We can help on both sides. It's mutually beneficial.
That's the whole point of this meeting,
Yes.
well, Ali and MSR. If you see, I'm not touching on the numbers, I'm not touching about your everything, but I wanted to capture a simple human, if he has an idea, what he has to do, and how Indian startup and also the US startup need to help from the talent perspective, from the investment perspective, from the mentorship perspective, right? So that is the main interest. I wanted to, being in Atlanta, I wanted to make a sister city, right? You heard about sister city concept between Hyderabad and Atlanta. So definitely Ali and MSR, I'll be conversating with you more on this to understand and how we can synergize on this. And if I were to ask you the top 5 companies, named renowned companies which are incubated in your hubs, what would be there? Ali, I would like you to go first.
Oh, that are currently incubated or that are graduates, because we are lucky that we have 2 unicorn graduates that started at Atlanta Tech Village. Callan Lee started here. Tope, the founder, had a hot desk. He didn't even have a full reserve desk. He just had a floating membership. And SalesLoft was also started here. And so between those and our other graduates, we've raised, I don't think it's actually quite as much as MSR's teams raised. I think you mentioned over 4 billion. I think we're somewhere just over 3.5 billion, but we'll work on it. We actually have several very interesting companies in the village now. I would say Prize Picks is an interesting company that's fast growing. They focus on online fantasy sports gambling. And that's new in the US because it's only just now becoming legalized. And so they have a very rapid trajectory. We just graduated a company called AssureSign. We also have quite a few companies that are in the fintech space, and such as Sunday App, which is actually headquartered in the UK, and they help with restaurant payments. We've got a lot. We house just under 1,200 entrepreneurs under our roof, and so it's a wide variety and changes every 30 days, to be honest.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah. So I think my story is not dissimilar to what Ali said. So we have a number of interesting companies. So The company which has raised the maximum money is a company called Bizongo, which is into, it's an e-commerce company, and they raised about 187 million or so. Then we have a company called MyGate, which is, we have these gated communities. So basically they do visitor management for them. Then we have an interesting company in the mobility space, basically making electric vehicles, two-wheelers, and actually three-wheelers for transport and cargo. That's a company called Gayam. Then we have companies in the agri-tech space. We have a company called Farmart, which is again, raised about close to 50 million in capital. Yeah, so we have a lot of, and we have now increasingly a number of very interesting healthcare companies. There's a company called Blue Semi, which is has built a non-invasive glucometer. Okay, and so as you know, India is probably the diabetes capital of the world. So they're solving both a social problem as well as building a nice business around it. Yeah, so we've got a lot. I mean, I can go on.
Hard to narrow it down.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear, MSR and Ali. And one other thing would be definitely cross exchange of the ideas, right? If any of the idea is successful in India, how that can be translated in US, and similarly vice versa. So we can, in more conversation, we can learn. And last topic I would touch upon would be, if any of the new young entrepreneur comes to you, what are the support from the ecosystem perspective? Can you elaborate to our viewers what you can do if an idea is if idea is pitched to you? How do you translate that idea into an opportunity or a final product, and how much time it takes typically, and what are the steps you follow? High level.
That's a whole other like podcast here. That's a big answer, Praveen. It is. How much time it takes is very variable, depending on what the idea is, how experienced the founder is, what connections already exist. Is it greenfield, so it's a brand new idea, or is it in a space that there's already players? There's so much nuance in how quickly something can come to fruition. Not the least of which you think about success stories like, I'm going to use Angry Birds as an example only because it's a game app that somebody put together very rapidly and suddenly became very popular. And that wasn't necessarily marketing, looking for an audience, product market fit, or anything else. Things like MSR mentioned, things with logistics, for example. So Carpool Logistics is one of our fast growing companies. They transfer literally cars from one place to another. And they were working and doing really great. But when the pandemic hit, they suddenly became very popular because people were buying a lot of used cars. That's not something you can anticipate necessarily happening, that a global pandemic is going to cause a car shortage. So there's always, I think, a lot of variables in that. For us specifically, we offer access, again, to ideas, talent, and capital. So when you join the village and you start going to our events, we specifically make introductions and have a strong network to investors, as well as banks. For example, Silicon Valley Bank is one of our partners, and they do a lot of work around creating alternative capital sources. You don't always have to sell a bit of your shares to a VC. And then again, access to our mentors and advisors who are experts in a variety of different areas. Some of them are existing VCs or are enterprise executives. And so they can give you access to the different Fortune 500 and Fortune 100 companies based in Atlanta, much like MSR's program, where they do corporate matching so that you get into the corporations and they might even buy you.
Awesome. MSR, you want to add anything in this?
No, I think pretty much Ali covered everything. I mean, as I said, both of us can, I'm sure, between us, if you give us a chance, we can talk about this till the end of the day. So, but I kind of try and let me say I would largely echo what Ali says on this one. And obviously there will be some local variations because we're two different places. But by and large, I think the approach, the philosophy remains the same.
Thank you. thank you so much for your time. And the final message from you, what are the characteristics for being a good entrepreneur? If you can let the viewers know, we'll close this. And in future, definitely we'll have more sessions on funding and whatnot on the entrepreneur startup cycle. I will definitely take your help. So final message from you both to become a good entrepreneur.
MSR, why don't you start?
So first be passionate about what you do. Yeah, I think that's the number one thing. Second, be resilient.
Yes.
Third, be prepared to work very hard. Okay.
Absolutely.
And fourth, be prepared to get lucky.
Yeah. I don't know that I have much to add to that. I was thinking of resilience as really flexibility. Be prepared to pivot on your idea. Don't think that the way that you first thought about it is the way that it has to go. Be prepared to get advice and feedback and market validation and make tweaks and changes and pivot with where you thought you were going to somewhere new. So be open to that. And I would say be ready to wear a lot of hats and learn a lot about a lot of different things, because when you are an entrepreneur, you have to know a little bit about a lot of different pieces. It's running a small business times 100.
Sure.
I think I'll just add one last thing to that. Be humble.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. Being humble is very, very important. And I think, thank you so much, MSR and Ali. Definitely this 45 minutes is not enough to give more insights and inputs to all of our viewers. And we will be constantly in touch with you if you have any questions for all our NRIs, anyone who comes up with an idea. I'll definitely facilitate this in future. And that's all to today's shows. Hope the viewers enjoy, and please feel free to reach out to us for any of the questions you have on the startups or entrepreneurship. So MSR, Ali, thank you so much for your valuable time, and have a good night and good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Ali. Pleasure talking to you. We'll connect offline. And of course, thank you, Praveen, for having me here. And I really enjoyed it. I didn't realize we'd been talking for almost an hour.
It's a wonderful conversation. Thank you. MSR, it's a pleasure to meet you, and I'm excited about partnership opportunities.
Thank you. Look forward. Bye.